In today's spot, we'll be checking out the DC Comics Designer Series Greg Capullo, figure number 18, GCPD Batman. Alright, let's get some measurements going. The smaller, unsuited Batman stands about 7 inches tall, while the Mech Batman stands, technically, if you count the top of the pointed ears or the antennas, he stands closer to 10 inches tall. The set comes with very few accessories, one of which being the handgun for Batman, which I have to admit, despite the fact it's a very simplistic looking design, it has some nice interesting little paint details on there. Some blue, and then you've got the little hazard yellow and black stripes. And you can take the blaster and either fit it into Batman's hand, which I have to say is a little on a stressful side, trying to get that lodged into his hand. The other hand, unfortunately, is closed fist, and he doesn't come with any sort of interchangeable hands, so you can't really, of course, you can't have it over here. I wish that it fit in the hand a little bit better, because one of the worries that I have, it looks like it's actually taking off the paint on the interior of the hand. That's no good. What you can also do too is you can take it and hold it in his holster, which I don't think will have nearly the problem with removing a paint as putting it into his hands. Before we look at the mech suit version of Batman, let's have a look at just all the cool details. Of the 4 figures, now this Greg Capullo wave had Aquaman, Green Lantern Hal Jordan, and Superman, which I've actually done reviews on all the 3 figures. The only one I didn't pick up yet was this one right here. Comic book store finally stocked them, picked them up. That's the story that's brought us to the table. So for a different take on Batman, he has a neat looking design aspect to him. I like the sculpting of his face. I really dig also that he's got these little extra panel lines in his cowl, which almost doesn't seem apparent until you start looking really closely at it. He has the same slitted mouth that I didn't quite like on the other 3 figures, but somehow works quite well here on Batman. The bat emblem, again, a slightly different take on the design of the Batman logo, but it looks really neat actually, and I don't know intentionally if that be the case, but I kind of like that the bat logo looks like it almost has fangs. He's got that same sort of yellowing that's on the one shoulder. The other shoulder stays pretty bare, although it does still have its fair share of some details there on the forearm, and some nice panel lining there in the torso. It relies only on the sculpt to accomplish this, as there's no additional paint that's added anywhere on here other than just the black suit. Mind you, he does have that yellow that's also in the belt, which matches that of the bat emblem. It seems like it's slightly a varied color, but it's close enough that it doesn't bother me too much. It's also to note as well that the coloring on the interior of the bat logo looks like it's a slightly different black than the plastic makeup of his body. And you've got the gray harness holster on the side of his leg, which has more of a softer rubber than being a denser plastic. He's got some painted on the undersoles of his shoes in a gray color versus, again, it adds to break up a little bit of the old general constant color of black being used here in the figure. The belt, by the way, is softer rubber, and while I would say it is separate from the rest of the figure, they've adhered it, they've glued it to the top of his waist, so even though this part is looser, and does a little bit add for a clearance on the leg motion and movement, you can't move the belt. It's been glued to the top of the torso. He actually has a fair bit of articulation actually as well. The head hinges back and forth, and what I do like, and what I will probably display him with, is I like that you can kind of angle the head. Now you can accomplish that a lot of times with ball jointed figures, but Batman seems to have a much more fluid motion to the head, where it seems like you can get a much more natural pose coming out of him. He has the upper torso crunch, which is a little on the stiffer side. As well, he has the waist swivel. The arms hinge outward, as well as you can rotate the arms all the way around. He has a swivel at the bicep, a hinge in the elbow, Has rotation in the hand as well as a slight, not really so much slight hinge. Looks like it's just a peg that's pegging the hand into the socket. So I wouldn't probably twist that too much. Legs hinge outward considerably. A forward and back motion on the legs. Now, this leg, of obvious reasons, can move a little further than this leg because the belt kind of is holding it back a little bit. He has a swivel cut on the top portion of his thigh, double hinge on the knee, and a swivel on the foot, as well as a hinge up and down. Liking this Batman. Now, we've gotten this Batman before. The Multiverse figure release had this guy as well. It goes without saying that much like the Marvel Select versions, I think are a much more superior figure to that of Marvel Legends. I think, again, the DC Collectibles is a much more preferred choice, myself at least, getting a much better looking representation of GCPD Batman than what we got with the Multiverse version of that. And, it goes without saying that I personally feel like Mattel is a more scaled down, more accessible retail release, but I think the real money for me is always generally getting these guys in the DC Collectibles releases. Moving along then to the Mech version of GCPD Batman, that's a mouthful. We got this really neat looking mech suit version of Batman, and he's just beautifully painted here in a metallic blue. Has some gorgeous looking little accent points here of blue. You got the kind of the sirens there of the blue and the red. Some nice panel striping, and I'm digging the black treatment that's been added here. You got a little bit of that red going there as well. I love the emblem. I think the emblem is a nice touch, and really equally so, I think the sculpt overall is done quite nicely. And there's the helmet, which has almost, again, a faux bat ear to it. I personally like the design of GCPD Batman, not as, of course, a long-term substitute for Batman, but I dug kind of like the short-term appeal of having Batman kind of representing a mech suit, so to speak. It added to the appeal that if he was fighting something, you could imagine that something would just be ripping away at the mech suit. So he could take a little bit more damage than just a regular manned hero fighting, a monster or villain or something like that. One of the cool, neat aspects of the figure as well is that you can take the helmet off. Again, there's some really close, cool details there. You take the helmet off, and underneath is the bat head. And to give you just a scale comparison, it is the same size head. Slightly varied in paint. I couldn't tell you. I guess you could technically. We'll look into that in a second. But it is the same head size, maybe a slight variation on paint. Like it looks like the lip portion is a little bit darker color than the lips here on the regular Batman. To further add to the coolness of this, what you can also do too is take the front chest armor here, and you can flip it up. And again, revealing, it's pretty much, again, the same sort of Batman figure. It's a nice treat to be able to see it and know it's to scale. Sometimes when you get mech suit versions of something, they tend to scale the figure down inside, that he just realistically wouldn't be the exact same size as if you put him next to a regular figure. But here, you have a pretty one-to-one scale comparison of the mech suit version of Batman versus the regular Batman here. And again, I don't know if you'd really want to. Oh, but you could take the torso out. I was going to say, you could take the head off. It doesn't look like it's ball jointed though, so yeah, you can't remove the head sculpt. It's roughly about the same sort of idea though. I'm not really sure why it had to unpeg itself. I guess if you wanted to, I guess that's the real intent. You could have it take the torso out like that, leave this off completely, and then you could have Batman pose next to it as if he hasn't not gone into the suit, which obviously seems to be the intent as to why this was removed. So a nice touch there by DC Collectibles. I didn't actually realize that you could remove the torso. So we take that. You know what? I was going to say we'll leave it out, but we'll just kind of leave it out for the time being just to show some interior details there of the torso. Some gunmetal gray incorporated in there as well. One thing the figure does, and I've given it away, is the paint. Like, the paint is really good on here. The metallic blue, again, the gunmetal gray, even on the under area of the torso plate, which is something you really wouldn't, you'd see it obviously if it was open this way, but you wouldn't see it if it was closed shut. So I really like that they would have gone as far as to sculpt all that on the interior. And I guess what you could do, it defeats the purpose, obviously, just having the helmet down, because it could theoretically, you could have Batman really in there, but, there's that option there as well. So let's go ahead and we'll put Batman back in. Slide him back into place, pop that over. I'm not going to put the helmet on just yet, because there's something actually, we're going to talk about the articulation. He has a fair bit, but then he disappoints me in one aspect of his posability. So his arms hinge outward, his head, now that we're looking at it, doesn't swivel, doesn't have a ball joint to it, but the shoulders hinge outward. You can also rotate the arms all the way around, and he has a very mild bend. That's about all you're really going to get out of it. He does have also a swivel in the hand and a hinge back and forth. And just before I forget about it, default out of packaging, he comes with a pair of closed fists. I've just gone ahead and just simply popped them out and replaced them with these grabbing hands, what he came with included, for an alternate look. I kind of dig it myself with the grabbing hands, but again, you could go closed fists if you so prefer. And each of those hands are pegged, as well as they have a hinge to them. He doesn't have an upper torso ball joint, which I kind of hoped he could have had, because what they've ended up giving him instead is a waist swivel. But as you can see, what they've done is they've cut the waist on an angle. So instead of being able to rotate it this way, and I can see the reasoning why they did it was so that it wouldn't disrupt the rubber kind of utility belt that he's got on the front here. But having it on a slight angle swivel really makes it seem very apparently awkward. Like, there's really no way you could properly pose this guy to make it look accurate. I would have preferred if they had kept this molded and given him a ball joint that would have sat right underneath here, where you could actually just have rotated the top part. That's not the part that bothers me, though. The legs go forward and back, and he's got the bend at the knee, to a double bend knee to be exact, and he's also got the bend in the foot, and you can rotate the foot as well. It bothers me, though, if we just put him to the side, get him to stand properly. Going back to the original Batman, you remember he could do this. Now, this gives a lot of extra stuff that you can do with this Batman. You can do him with a more wider stance. You can have him, if you had a proper display stand, you could have the foot kind of forward, back, and then you could kind of have him just slightly angled. So you can get him a real cool stance going on this smaller Batman. However, when we get to the mech suit version of him, the legs could only do this. This is where I wish that they had put a hinge where you could have brought the legs outward. As good as it does look, it doesn't have peg holes, mind you, but it stands fine on its own. I wish the legs could have hinged outward. You could have split the leg, you could have brought them, giving the mech suit a much more a wider stance, just to give a much more opposing a look. And I wish that was the case. I wish it had that, and sadly it doesn't. It only allows you to do this with the legs themselves. So that's the only thing I would say is I would fix about it. Well, that's not true. I would technically fix two things. I would probably remove the waist swivel altogether, and I give a top torso ball joint instead. But I would also give them the option to split the leg on the articulation, similar to what we've done here with the smaller Batman. The GCPD Batman from the Greg Capullo designer series is a really decent looking figure. I like the fact that they would have paired both the mech version of Batman as well as the regular costume version of Batman. And overall, I think both figures work quite well. The only thing I would really say as nitpicks are the fact that the smaller unmeched suit Batman really struggles to hold the handgun without chipping some paint that I really didn't think should have been a problem. The mech suit, on the other hand, is a glorious looking piece, but I feel like Articulation suffers a bit from making it a stellar piece. It's still a really good figure, but I think it could have been so much better if it had necessary articulation, maybe in the top torso, as well as a split in the leg. Despite that, these two pieces are glorious, and really, once again, an argument I can make as to why holding out and picking them in a DC Collectibles release are all generally better than holding out and just getting the Mattel Multiverse figures. Like the Mattel Multiverse GCPD Batman was okay, but it pales in comparison to what we're getting here with the Greg Capullo wave from DC Collectibles. Once again, we were having a look today at the DC Collectibles DC Comics Designer Series Greg Capullo wave. This was figure 18, the GCPD Batman, which also came with the Mech as well, which is really cool. If you guys haven't had a chance yet to subscribe to this channel, what are you waiting for? Hit that little subscribe button down below. You won't miss a beat when it comes to future videos. If you're all also fans of DC Collectibles, there's a playlist on this channel specifically dedicated to DC Collectibles. So if you want to just look at those reviews, I'd like to think that you would watch the other reviews as well, but if that's specifically what you want to be checking out, you can head over and look at that playlist and watch those videos at your viewing pleasure. As always, guys, thanks for watching as you always do. See you next time.